Hello, and welcome back to the Best English Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and honestly, it just makes me so happy to have you joining me today. Whether you're commuting through a busy city, enjoying a quiet moment with a cup of coffee, or maybe you're just unwinding after a long day, I truly hope you're ready to dive into another really helpful journey right into the heart of the English language. Today, we're not just touching upon, but really getting into two of the most super important, active, and intertwined skills for any language learner. Listening and speaking. These aren't merely separate abilities. They are, in essence, the perfect pair, the key combination for authentic, real-world communication. I mean, imagine trying to dance a tango with only one partner. It just doesn't work, does it? You simply cannot truly get your point across and engage meaningfully in English if you can't genuinely grasp what others are conveying, and conversely, your listening comprehension will only truly flourish and deepen when you actively participate in conversations, putting what you hear into practice. This episode, which is going to be quite substantial, and perhaps, to be fair, a couple more that will follow, is really put together just for you, our incredibly diligent and aspiring English learners who are, let's say, at an intermediate stage. We totally get it. You've already mastered the fundamental building blocks. You can handle simple chats, maybe even talk about everyday things pretty easily. But now, you're keenly wanting to go from just managing to feeling super confident, to express your ideas clearly, show your unique personality, and understand the subtle layers and intricacies of spoken English. And let me assure you, that is exactly the transformative journey we are going to guide you through. Our focus extends far beyond just memorizing vocabulary lists or perfecting grammatical rules. We're delving into the very rhythm, the natural flow, the emotional resonance, and indeed the profoundly human aspect, the real human side of talking. We'll explore how English is spoken not in textbooks, but in real life, with all its beautiful imperfections and spontaneous expressions. So, I invite you to settle in comfortably, maybe grab a notebook if you like to jot down thoughts, or simply open your mind and heart to what's coming. We're about to break down some incredibly practical strategies, share stories you can totally relate to that will hopefully resonate with your own experiences, and crucially, provide you with lots of chances to actively practice right alongside me here on the podcast. Our ultimate ambition is not merely to impart knowledge about listening and speaking, but to empower you to do them way better, making every step of your English learning journey smoother, infinitely more enjoyable, and ultimately, profoundly more successful. Let's kick things off with a robust foundation, starting with the often underestimated cornerstone, listening. Pause for a moment and consider this fundamental truth. Before you can formulate a clear response, before you can get your insightful opinions out there, before you can truly engage in any form of dialogue, you've just got to understand. Listening isn't just about letting sounds hit your ears. It's the deep mental process of figuring out what's being said, interpreting, and understanding meaning from those sounds. It is, undeniably, the silent, often undervalued, yet absolutely essential partner in every single spoken interaction. Think of it as the input that feeds the output. You can't truly cook a magnificent meal without gathering all the right ingredients first, right? Imagine yourself immersed in a real-world scenario, just brimming with authentic English. Perhaps you're navigating the bustling corridors of a grand international airport, attempting to figure out instructions from a gate agent. Or maybe you're unwinding, fully absorbed in an English film, trying to follow the fast conversations. Or perhaps you're simply having a casual chat with a new English-speaking friend you've just made. If your listening comprehension isn't robust, what invariably happens? You miss critical details. You misinterpret vital instructions. You might feel a little bit frustrated, and inevitably, your hard-earned confidence can take a noticeable dip. And when that confidence wavers, your natural desire to speak, to take risks, to express yourself, often fades away right along with it. It's a natural, albeit disheartening cycle. However, when your listening abilities sharpen and evolve, a vast, vibrant new world opens up before you. Conversations transform from potential minefields into enjoyable, flowing exchanges. You begin to pick up new words and common phrases so easily, noticing how they're used in natural contexts rather than just seeing them on a list. You start to notice the small differences of various accents, recognizing the rhythm and melody of different English-speaking regions. And most importantly, you begin to instinctively grasp how native speakers organically construct their sentences, the inherent musicality, the natural stress patterns, and the authentic intonation that is all through their speech. This understanding, almost magically, starts to permeate and enrich your own speaking, making it sound more natural and fluent. Listening, in this profound sense, provides the constant, invaluable linguistic input that organically fuels and refines your spoken output. It's the consistent flow of information that allows your own language production to become more sophisticated and accurate. Now, let's unpack a crucial distinction, one that really holds the key to significant progress: the difference between passive listening and active listening. Many of us, particularly when we're just starting out with a new language, tend to engage in what we call passive listening. This is when English kind of just exists as background noise in your environment. Maybe you have an English podcast playing softly while you're tidying your home, or you're watching a popular TV show with English dialogue while your attention is, partially diverted. This form of listening certainly offers some benefits. It helps your ears get used to the overall soundscape of the language, familiarizing you with its inherent rhythm, its stress patterns, and some basic ups and downs of their voice. It's excellent for general immersion and creating a sense of familiarity. You're absorbing the soundtrack of English, much like listening to background music in a cafe. However, for truly meaningful and accelerated progress, especially as you move beyond the basics into intermediate proficiency, you absolutely need to deliberately cultivate and really start doing active listening. Active listening implies your full, undivided attention. You are deeply concentrating. Your entire focus is dedicated to comprehending the speaker's complete message, picking up on their emotions, understanding their underlying intentions, and even anticipating where their thoughts might lead. You are not merely allowing the cascade of sounds to wash over you. You are vigorously and analytically processing them, really working to understand them. You're subtly, perhaps even unconsciously, posing questions to yourself like, what's the main idea here? What specific pieces of information are really important for me to get? How does this particular statement logically connect to what was articulated just moments before? This intense level of engagement undeniably demands effort, a sustained mental focus, but I promise you, the rewards are huge. It's the profound distinction between simply hearing a melody and truly listening to the intricate layers of the instrumentation, the nuanced vocal performance, and the emotional story embedded within the lyrics. It's about engagement, not just reception. As English learners, especially those at an intermediate level, you stand at an exciting point. You've successfully cleared the initial, often daunting hurdles of basic comprehension, yet a fresh set of challenges inevitably emerges as you strive for higher proficiency. Let's be real about some of the most common challenges you might currently be encountering, and take comfort in the fact that you are absolutely not alone in facing them. The elusive speed of natural speech is a common hurdle. Native speakers, in the natural flow of conversation, often speak pretty quickly. To a learner, this can often feel like a dizzying, indistinct blur. The challenge isn't solely about recognizing individual words on their own, but rather about understanding how they seamlessly blend, merge, and transform in connected speech. It's like trying to understand a waterfall by focusing on each individual drop, rather than the majestic flow. Then there's the wide range of accents. The English-speaking world is huge and beautifully diverse. Consider the rich variations, the crisp tones of British English, the melodic cadences of American English, the distinct rhythms of Australian, the lilting charm of Irish, the clear articulation of Canadian, and countless fascinating regional accents, each possessing its unique phonetic fingerprint. They can indeed sound remarkably different from each other, requiring your ear to adapt. You'll also encounter the tricky area of new vocabulary and idioms. Even if you have a pretty strong general vocabulary, a mere handful of unfamiliar words can momentarily derail your comprehension, particularly when encountering idiomatic expressions or phrasal verbs that don't make sense literally. These can feel like secret codes that native speakers effortlessly understand. And don't even get me started on slang and informal expressions. The vibrant, ever-evolving landscape of informal language, frequently used in everyday casual conversation, often finds no place within the structured confines of your textbooks. These are the spontaneous, unwritten rules of real communication. Finally, there's all the background noise and life itself. In genuine, lived-in situations, the environment is rarely pristine and quiet. There's almost always a symphony of background noise, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of other conversations, the hum of traffic. Moreover, you might find yourself feeling fatigued, preoccupied, or stressed, all of which can really get in the way of your ability to process and comprehend spoken language. It's super important to remember that these perceived challenges are not defects in your learning. They are an entirely normal and expected part of the language acquisition journey. Every single individual who has ever embarked on the path of learning a new language has encountered and dealt with these very same obstacles. The truly encouraging news, however, is that there are lots of really effective and practical strategies to systematically overcome each and every one of these hurdles, and we are going to dive into them throughout the course of this enriching series. To give you a clearer picture of some of these common listening challenges in a way that feels deeply relatable, allow me to share a short yet quite poignant real-life story. Imagine a bright, eager tourist, let's call her Anya, who has just arrived in the bustling, historic heart of London. Anya is a dedicated student of English. She'd been studying the language for many years, diligently going to classes, and she had a pretty good handle on grammar and a respectable vocabulary. However, this particular trip marks her very first encounter with the unadulterated, fast-paced, and wonderfully natural English, spoken amidst the vibrant cacophony of a real lived-in environment. She finds herself navigating the complicated hallways of a grand, incredibly busy train station, a mix of announcements, hurried footsteps, and distant train whistles. Her immediate goal, to purchase a ticket to a charming town outside the city. She patiently queues, and when her turn arrives, she approaches the ticket counter. The agent, a wonderfully friendly but undeniably fast-talking Londoner, greets her with a warm smile and asks, in a super-fast string of words, "Where are you heading today, love? And what time are you looking to travel?" Anya's ears, used to the slower, more deliberate pace of classroom English, pick up "heading today." But the affectionate, casual address, "love," sounds remarkably peculiar to her, almost like an unexpected question mark at the end of the sentence. And the sheer velocity of the agent's speech, "What time are you looking to travel?" seems to blend into one long, undifferentiated stream of sound. Anya, momentarily overwhelmed by the swirling symphony of the station's ambient noise and the sheer speed of the words, falters. Her mind races, desperately trying to translate each individual word in her head, a process that is, in such a dynamic situation, almost impossible to execute in real time. She internally grapples. Did he ask where I live, or where I'm going? What does love mean in this context? The effort to process every single lexical item in isolation, rather than grasping the overarching message, is mentally exhausting and highly inefficient when someone is speaking at a natural clip. After a moment of real struggle, she just managed to say hesitantly, "Pardon?" The agent, perceptive and genuinely helpful, softens his tone slightly and obligingly repeats, this time enunciating with a bit more clarity and at a slightly reduced pace. "Which destination, dear? And when are you hoping to leave?" This second attempt, with its gentler tempo and slightly altered phrasing, acts like a lifesaver for Anya. Destination. Oh, right, she thinks. And hoping to leave clearly means what time. She connects the dots. Anya, with a wave of relief, eventually succeeds in purchasing her ticket. Yet, the entire experience, though ultimately successful, leaves her feeling a tad flustered, a little breathless. What unfolded in that brief, intense exchange at the ticket counter? Several key listening challenges came together. The natural speed of real English, the casual, informal way he spoke, love, dear, that wasn't in her books, and most importantly, her first instinct to try and translate every single word in her head, instead of just getting the main idea. This is a perfect example of how real-world listening, with all its unpredictable twists and turns, can be so different from the controlled, predictable classroom. So now that we've pinpointed these common challenges, how do we actually start breaking them down and building up solid listening skills? Our very first practical strategy is super simple, but unbelievably effective in its impact. Always begin your listening practice with topics that are already deeply familiar to you and materials that genuinely spark your interest and bring you joy. Consider this analogy. If you were attempting to learn quantum physics, a super complicated subject, would you immediately jump into a highly dense, expert-level university lecture on the topic when you're only at the beginning of your English learning journey? Absolutely not. You would inevitably feel overwhelmed, frustrated, and quickly discouraged. However, if you choose to listen to a captivating podcast discussing your absolute favorite hobby, be it the intricate world of gourmet cooking, the latest developments in your beloved sport, the calming art of gardening, or the thrill of travel adventures, something you already know a ton about in your native language, your brain instantly gets a huge leg up. Chatursi. Why is this so effective? Because you've already got the basics down. You can kind of guess what they'll talk about, what words might come up, and even where the conversation is headed. You understand the basic situation. This invaluable background knowledge frees up your brain power to really focus on the English language itself, on discerning the specific pronunciation, identifying common phrases, recognizing sentence structures, and picking up on the speaker's intonation, instead of trying to understand a new topic and a new language at the same time. It's like having a trusted map when you explore a new city. You can focus on the sights rather than worrying about getting lost. This approach naturally builds your confidence, makes learning fun, and makes the challenge feel doable. Think of it like learning to drive a car. You don't start your driving lessons on a bustling multi-lane highway during rush hour. You wisely begin on quiet, residential streets, slowly building your confidence and refining your skills in a less intimidating environment. The exact same principle applies to developing your listening proficiency. Start where you're comfortable, where what you already know can easily help you learn the language. This could be simple news reports on topics you already follow, engaging podcasts made for English learners, interesting interviews with people talking about everyday things, or even nice short stories simplified for learners. The key is to make it accessible and genuinely engaging. All right, my dear listeners, it's now time to put this concept into immediate action with a short, interactive mini practice session. Imagine you are truly hearing this clip. Your main goal right now is not to catch every single word or worry about tiny details, but just to grasp the overarching main idea. Focus on the gist, the core message. Good morning, everyone. My day, like many of yours I imagine, usually begins quite early, around 6 a.m., actually. The very first thing I do, even before my brain fully wakes up, is stumble into the kitchen to grab a quick coffee. Nothing fancy, mind you, just a plain black coffee, simple and to the point. After that invigorating first sip, I usually spend about half an hour, sometimes a little more, just quietly reading the news online, catching up on current events and seeing what's happening in the world. It's my little slice of calm before the storm. Then, without fail, it's time for a brisk, quick jog around the park. I absolutely adore getting some fresh, crisp air and seeing the sunrise before the entire city truly rouses itself and gets busy. A quick, refreshing shower follows, and then, feeling energized and ready to face the day, I'm usually prepared to head out for work by around 8 a.m. That's my typical start. All right, the audio clip has finished. Now, without the urge to go back and replay it mentally, try your best to answer these 3 straightforward questions based solely on what you just heard. What is the primary, overarching topic of this short simulated audio clip? What is the approximate time the speaker typically begins their day? Can you recall at least one specific activity they engage in before they depart for work? Let's check how brilliantly you did. The main topic, the core essence of this short clip, is definitely the speaker's typical morning routine. The speaker clearly stated that they begin their day quite early, specifically around 6 a.m. As for activities before leaving for work, several options were mentioned, and any of these would be perfectly correct. They drink coffee, they read the news online, or they go for a jog around the park. How did you do with that little exercise? If you successfully got the main idea and were able to recall at least 1 or 2 specific details, you've done an absolutely excellent job. This foundational skill, the ability to listen for the gist, to extract the overall meaning, even if a few individual words happen to elude your understanding, is a super important skill for every English learner. It prevents you from getting bogged down and allows you to keep pace with the conversation. Now that we've covered the basics of active listening and why familiar topics help, let's get into some more advanced, really practical strategies that will truly sharpen your listening comprehension. These are techniques that experienced language learners and even native speakers do without even thinking about it to make sense of the rapid flow of information. Our next powerful strategy is predicting content. This isn't about guessing randomly. It's about using all the available clues to anticipate what a speaker might say next. Think about it. Before a conversation even begins, or before you click play on a podcast, you often have some context. The title of an episode, the image accompanying an article, the topic you know your friend wants to discuss, all these provide valuable hints. For instance, if you see a podcast titled The Future of Renewable Energy, you can immediately predict vocabulary related to solar panels, wind turbines, climate change, and sustainability. Your brain then activates this relevant vocabulary, making it easier to recognize when you hear it. It's like preparing your mental toolkit before you start a project. Let me share a quick example. Imagine you're about to listen to an English news report. The headline flashes across the screen. Local bakery wins national award. What words or phrases do you immediately expect to hear? Probably things like delicious bread, cakes, community, hard work, recognition, baking, recipes, and perhaps even celebration. By actively thinking about these possibilities before you listen, you prime your brain to recognize them, really making your listening much more efficient. This proactive approach really makes it easier on your brain during listening. Another vital skill is knowing when to listen for gist versus listening for detail. Not every piece of information in a conversation or an audio clip carries the same weight. Sometimes you just need the main idea, the overall message. This is listening for gist. For example, if someone is giving you directions to a party, you need to understand the main turns and landmarks, not necessarily the exact number of trees on the left side of the road. Other times, however, the specific details are crucial. If you're listening to instructions on how to assemble a piece of furniture, every single step matters. The trick is to be flexible. Don't try to understand every single word all the time. This leads to mental fatigue and frustration. Instead, consciously decide, am I trying to get the big picture here, or do I need to capture every specific piece of information? This smart way of listening is what really good listeners do. Consider this scenario. You're listening to a friend recount their entire day. You don't need to remember every single minute detail of their commute or every item they bought at the grocery store. You're listening for the gist. Did they have a good day? What was the most interesting thing that happened? But if they then tell you, could you pick up milk, bread, and eggs on your way home? Then you switch to listening for detail because those specific items are crucial. Training your brain to make this distinction will save you immense mental energy. A particularly tricky aspect of natural English, especially for English learners, is understanding connected speech. When native speakers talk, words don't always sound like separate, distinct units. They often blend together, sounds change, and some sounds even disappear. This phenomenon is known as connected speech, and it includes things like elision, assimilation, and linking sounds. For example, cup of tea often sounds like cuppa tea. Did you can sound like didja. Going to becomes gonna. This is why sometimes, even if you know all the individual words, you might struggle to understand a sentence when it's spoken quickly. Let me tell you a story about this. My friend, Leo, who is from Italy and an English learner, was once trying to order coffee in a very busy cafe in New York City. The barista, in a rush, asked him, Want a coffee? Leo, expecting to hear, do you want a coffee? Was totally confused. He kept repeating, pardon, and the barista kept repeating, want a coffee? Faster each time. It wasn't until a kind person behind him in line slowly said, he's asking if you want a coffee, that Leo's face lit up with understanding. He knew want and a and coffee, but the way they connected, wanna, was completely new to his ear. This is a classic example of connected speech causing a misunderstanding. It's not about your vocabulary, it's about your ear adapting to the natural flow. To practice this, try listening to short phrases and actively trying to identify where the words link or where sounds disappear. For example, listen to, I am going to eat it, and notice how it often becomes, I'm gonna eat it, or even, I'm need it. The more you expose yourself to natural, rapid speech, the more your ear will adapt. Using transcripts is incredibly helpful here. Listen first without the transcript, then listen with it, specifically noting where words connect or change. Another significant challenge is dealing with unknown vocabulary. It's impossible to know every single word in a language, and you will inevitably come across unfamiliar terms. The key is not to panic and stop listening. Instead, practice inferring meaning from context. Look at the words around the unknown word. What's the general topic? Is the word a noun, a verb, or an adjective? Does the speaker's tone give you a clue? Often, you can get a good enough understanding of the sentence even if you don't know the precise meaning of one or two words. Sometimes, the unknown word isn't even essential for understanding the main message. Imagine listening to a podcast about space, and the host says, the new telescope captured an image of a distant quasar. You might not know what a quasar is, but from the context, telescope, towards space, distant, you can infer it's some kind of celestial object, perhaps a star or a galaxy. For the purpose of understanding the sentence, that's often enough. Don't let one unknown word derail your entire comprehension. Focus on the words you do know and the overall flow of the sentence. Here's a practical tip that combines several of these ideas. Use transcripts and listen multiple times. This is a golden rule for improving listening. First, listen to a piece of audio, a short podcast segment, a news clip, a dialogue, without any visual aids. Try to get the main idea. Then, listen a second time, trying to pick out more details. After that, if a transcript is available, read along as you listen. This allows you to connect the written words with the spoken sounds, helping you identify connected speech, new vocabulary, and pronunciation patterns. Finally, listen a fourth time without the transcript, and you'll be amazed at how much more you understand. This iterative process is incredibly powerful for solidifying your listening skills. For our next practice, let's try a slightly longer scenario, focusing on both gist and some specific details, and see if you can navigate some natural speech patterns. Imagine you're listening to a friend, Maria, talking about her recent weekend trip. Oh, my weekend was absolutely fantastic. I went up to the mountains, just to get away from the city hustle and bustle. The weather was a bit iffy on Saturday, quite cloudy actually, so I mostly stayed indoors, read a book, and just chilled out. But Sunday? Oh, Sunday was glorious. The sun was out, not a cloud in the sky, so I decided to go for a really long hike. The views were just breathtaking, honestly. I saw this incredible waterfall, and the air was so fresh. I even managed to spot a couple of deer near the trail. It was such a refreshing break. I came back feeling completely recharged, ready for the week ahead. Definitely needed that. All right, Maria's story has ended. Now, without the urge to go back and replay it mentally, try your best to answer these 3 straightforward questions based solely on what you just heard. What is the primary, overarching topic of this short simulated audio clip? What is the approximate time the speaker typically begins their day? Can you recall at least one specific activity they engage in before they depart for work? Let's review. The main topic, the core essence of this short clip, is definitely the speaker's typical morning routine. The speaker clearly stated that they begin their day quite early, specifically around 6 a.m. As for activities before leaving for work, several options were mentioned, and any of these would be perfectly correct. They drink coffee, they read the news online, or they go for a jog around the park. How did you do with that little exercise? If you successfully got the main idea and were able to recall at least 1 or 2 specific details, you've done an absolutely excellent job. This foundational skill, the ability to listen for the gist, to extract the overall meaning, even if a few individual words happen to elude your understanding, is a super important skill for every English learner. It prevents you from getting bogged down and allows you to keep pace with the conversation. Now, let's switch gears from the listening side of things to the active and sometimes scarier world of speaking. For many English learners, speaking is the skill that causes the most anxiety. It's one thing to understand what you hear or read, but it's an entirely different challenge to produce the language yourself, spontaneously and accurately. Why is speaking often so scary? Well, there are several common reasons. The biggest one is often the fear of making mistakes. We worry about sounding foolish, about saying something incorrectly, or about not being understood. This fear can totally freeze you up, leading to a situation where you know the grammar and vocabulary, but when it comes time to speak, your mind just goes blank. Another reason is simply a lack of vocabulary right at your fingertips. You know words, but they don't come to mind quickly enough in a conversation. And finally, there's the challenge of fluency, the ability to speak smoothly and naturally, without too many hesitations or long pauses. But here's the wonderful truth. Every single person who speaks a second language fluently has gone through this exact same process. They've made mistakes, they've felt nervous, and they've pushed through it. The journey from passive knowledge to active use is the bridge you must cross. You have a huge amount of English knowledge stored in your brain from all your listening and reading. The goal now is to build the pathways that allow that knowledge to flow out effortlessly in speech. A crucial element of natural-sounding speech, often overlooked, is pronunciation focus, particularly on intonation, stress, and rhythm. It's not just about pronouncing individual words correctly, it's about the music of the language. Intonation refers to the rise and fall of your voice, which can convey meaning and emotion. Stress is about emphasizing certain syllables within words or certain words within sentences to highlight importance. Rhythm is the overall beat and flow of the language. Think about the difference between saying, "I can do it," emphasizing ability, versus "I can do it," emphasizing the action. These subtle shifts make a huge difference in how you are understood and how natural you sound. Let me share a story about a young woman named Clara. Clara was a brilliant English student, excellent at writing and reading, and she knew a vast amount of vocabulary. However, when she spoke, she sounded a bit robotic, almost like a computer. Her words were correct, but her sentences lacked the natural rise and fall, the emphasis that native speakers use. She would say, "I am going to the store," with equal stress on every word. One day, her English tutor recorded her speaking and then played a native speaker saying the exact same sentence. "I am going to the store." Clara noticed how the native speaker's voice went up on going and down on store, and how going was slightly louder. It was a revelation. She started practicing mimicking these patterns, exaggerating them at first, and slowly her speech began to sound much more natural and expressive. People started understanding her emotions better, and her conversations flowed more easily. This wasn't about learning new words. It was about learning the melody of English. To practice this, try listening to short sentences from native speakers and then immediately trying to imitate their intonation and stress patterns. Don't just repeat the words. Try to copy the sound exactly. Record yourself and compare. It might feel a bit silly at first, but it's incredibly effective. Another very human aspect of speaking, which can actually help with fluency, is using fillers naturally. Words like yo, well, you know, like, or I mean are often used by native speakers to give themselves a moment to think, to signal that they're still formulating their thoughts, or to soften a statement. While you don't want to overuse them, a smart use of fillers can make your speech sound more natural and less hesitant than long, awkward silences. They're like little breathing spaces in your conversation. For example, instead of a long silence while you search for a word, you might say, "Well, I think, the best approach would be." This sounds much more natural than just stopping mid-sentence. Pay attention to how native speakers use these fillers in podcasts or interviews. Notice when they use them and how they integrate them smoothly. Of course, expanding your vocabulary for speaking is also essential. This isn't just about memorizing lists, it's about learning thematic vocabulary and collocations. Collocations are words that frequently go together, like make a decision, Nia. Take a shower. Heavy rain or strong coffee. Learning words in chunks like this makes your speech sound more natural and helps you retrieve them more quickly. Instead of thinking of rain and a lot, you automatically think heavy rain. Let me share a quick story about collocations. I once had a student, let's call him Ben, who was trying to describe a very dark coffee. He kept saying, "This coffee is very black," which, isn't wrong, but it sounds a little bit off to a native ear. Through listening to how native speakers talked about coffee, he started to hear phrases like strong coffee or dark roast. He realized that while black coffee describes the color, strong coffee is the more common and natural way to talk about its intensity. It's these little pairings, these collocations, that really make your English sound natural. Try to learn new vocabulary in context, not in isolation. When you encounter a new word, try to find other words it commonly pairs with. For example, if you learn the word opportunity, think about phrases like miss an opportunity, seize an opportunity, or equal opportunity. This builds your active vocabulary, the words you can readily use in conversation. Here's a very practical tip to get started with speaking, especially if you're feeling nervous. Start small. Talk to yourself, record your voice. You don't need an audience to practice speaking. Describe your day to yourself in English. Narrate your actions as you're doing chores. Talk about a movie you just watched. The goal is to get your mouth and brain used to producing English sounds and sentences. Then, record yourself. It might feel uncomfortable listening to your own voice at first, but it's incredibly insightful. You'll hear your pronunciation, your hesitations, and where you might need to improve. It's a private, safe space for practice and self-correction. For our next practice, let's try a simple role-playing scenario. Imagine you are at a cafe, and the barista asks you about your order. I'll be the barista, and you respond. Focus on clear pronunciation and trying to use a natural intonation, even if your answer is simple. Hi there. What can I get for you today? Matr us, ratrons. Great choice. Anything else for you? Aye, excellent. Even those short exchanges are valuable practice. You're activating your English, forming sentences, and engaging in a real-time interaction. The more you do this, even with yourself, the easier it becomes. We've explored the foundations of listening and the initial steps to build speaking confidence. Now, let's talk about how these two skills don't just coexist, but how they actively integrate and really fuel each other to push you towards true fluency. This is where the magic happens, where your passive knowledge truly transforms into active communication. One of the most powerful techniques for integrating listening and speaking is called shadowing. Shadowing involves listening to a native speaker and simultaneously repeating what they say, almost like an echo. You're not just listening, you're actively producing the sounds, mirroring their pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, and even their speed. It's like being a linguistic parrot, but with a purpose. Why is shadowing so effective? Because it trains your mouth and brain to work together. You're bypassing the translation step and directly connecting the sounds you hear with the physical act of producing them. It helps you internalize the natural flow of English, improve your accent, and build muscle memory for speaking. You're essentially downloading the native speaker's speech patterns directly into your own speaking mechanism. Let me tell you about Kenji, a Japanese learner I know who struggled with sounding natural in English. He understood a lot, but his spoken English often sounded a bit choppy. His tutor suggested shadowing. Kenji started with short news clips, listening to a sentence, pausing, and then repeating it exactly as he heard it, focusing on the intonation. After a few weeks, he moved to shadowing in real time, speaking along with the audio. It was difficult at first, like trying to sing along to a fast song. But he persevered. After a few months, his English sounded remarkably different. His sentences flowed more smoothly, his stress was more accurate, and he even started using natural pauses and fillers without consciously thinking about them. He felt a huge boost in confidence because he wasn't just speaking grammatically, he was speaking naturally. Kenji's success story is a testament to the power of consistent shadowing. To practice shadowing, find a short audio clip, perhaps a segment from this podcast, or a short YouTube video. Listen to a sentence, pause, and repeat it, trying to match the speaker's rhythm and intonation. Once you're comfortable with that, try to speak along with the audio in real time, even if you fall behind sometimes. The goal is the imitation of the sound, not perfect comprehension at this stage. Closely related to shadowing is imitation and mimicry. This takes the concept a step further by encouraging you to consciously adopt the speech patterns of native speakers you admire. It's not about losing your own identity, but about expanding your range of how you speak. Pay attention to how your favorite podcast host speaks, how characters in a TV show express emotion, or how a news anchor delivers information. Notice their common phrases, their pauses, their vocal pitch. Then, try to incorporate those elements into your own speech. This helps you move beyond just correct English to natural and expressive English. For example, if you hear a native speaker say, "That's a really interesting point," with a rising intonation on interesting, try to copy that exact intonation when you express agreement. This kind of deliberate mimicry, especially focusing on intonation and rhythm, is incredibly effective for sounding more natural. Another crucial aspect of integrating these skills is through active recall and spaced repetition for speaking. You learn new vocabulary and phrases through listening and reading. But how do you make sure they move from your passive understanding to your active speaking vocabulary? Active recall means actively trying to remember and use new words and phrases. Spaced repetition involves reviewing these new items at increasing intervals to solidify them in your long-term memory. Instead of just reviewing flashcards, try to use the new word or phrase in a sentence out loud. For example, if you learned the phrase, to hit the nail on the head, meaning to describe something exactly right, don't just define it, say it. Sophia, you really hit the nail on the head with that explanation. The act of producing the sentence out loud, even if it's just to yourself, strengthens the neural pathways for speaking. You can use apps that incorporate spaced repetition, but make sure your practice includes speaking the words aloud. Now, let's talk about practical tools for conversation starters and keepers. Many learners struggle not just with what to say, but how to start a conversation or how to keep it going once it has begun. Learning a bunch of common phrases can be a game changer. For starters, simple phrases like, "How's your day going?" "What have you been up to?" or "Did you have a good weekend?" are excellent icebreakers. To keep the conversation flowing, you can use phrases like, "Tell me more about that." "That's interesting. Why do you say that?" Or, "What are your thoughts on?" These aren't just polite, they invite the other person to elaborate, giving you more listening input and more time to formulate your own response. Let's try a quick practice. Imagine you've just met someone new at a casual gathering. I'll start, and you respond, then try to ask a follow-up question using one of the conversation keeper phrases. "Hi there. What can I get for you today?" Great choice. Anything else for you? Excellent. Even those short exchanges are valuable practice. You're activating your English, forming sentences, and engaging in a real-time interaction. The more you do this, even with yourself, the easier it becomes. Finally, a crucial skill for more advanced speaking is giving opinions and justifying them. You're moving beyond just stating facts. You want to express your views and explain why you hold them. A good structure for this is state your opinion, then provide a reason or example. For example, instead of just saying, "I like coffee," you could say, "I really enjoy coffee because it helps me feel energized in the morning, and I love the ritual of brewing it." Or, "I disagree with that idea because I believe it doesn't consider all aspects of the problem." Using transition words like because, source, therefore, however, in my opinion, I believe, or from my perspective, can help structure your arguments. Our next practical tip for integrating these skills is perhaps the most important. Find a language partner or a language exchange group. All the solo practice in the world is valuable, but nothing replaces real-time, authentic interaction. A language partner provides a safe space to practice speaking without judgment, to make mistakes and learn from them. You can correct each other, discuss topics of mutual interest, and get immediate feedback on your listening and speaking. Look for online language exchange platforms, local community groups, or even friends who are also learning English. The key is consistent, low-pressure interaction. For our next practice, let's try a short dialogue where you express an opinion and justify it. I'll give you a prompt and you respond. Some people believe that learning a new language is easier for children than for adults. What's your opinion on that, and why? Excellent. That's a great example of expressing an opinion and providing a clear justification. This is how you move from basic communication to more sophisticated, engaging conversations. As we move into the final, advanced stage of our journey, we'll explore strategies that truly refine your English skills, allowing you to navigate complex conversations and maintain your learning momentum for the long term. This is where you start to master the subtle art of communication, moving beyond just correctness to true fluency and cultural understanding. A significant leap in comprehension comes from understanding idioms and phrasal verbs in context. English is incredibly rich with these expressions, and they are used constantly in everyday conversation. An idiom is a phrase where the meaning isn't obvious from the individual words. Example, kick the bucket means to die. A phrasal verb is a verb combined with a preposition or adverb, changing its meaning. Example, look up, can mean to search for information or to improve. These can be incredibly frustrating because they defy literal translation. The key to mastering them is to learn them in context, not in isolation. Don't just memorize a list of idioms. Instead, when you encounter an idiom or phrasal verb, pay attention to the surrounding words, the situation, and the speaker's tone. Often, the context will give you a strong clue about its meaning. For example, if someone says, "I was feeling a bit down, but then I decided to cheer myself up by watching a comedy," you can infer that cheer myself up means to make oneself feel happier. Let me tell you about a time I was teaching English to a group of students, and we were discussing the phrase, break a leg. One student, bless his heart, looked genuinely concerned and asked, "Why would you wish someone to break their leg before a performance?" We all had a good laugh, and it perfectly illustrated how literal translation can lead to complete misunderstanding when it comes to idioms. I explained that break a leg is an idiom meaning good luck, used especially in the performing arts. From then on, they started noticing how often idioms are used, and they made a conscious effort to understand the context rather than just the individual words. Next, let's talk about cultural nuances in communication. Language isn't just words, it's deeply intertwined with culture. What's considered polite in one culture might be direct or even rude in another. Understanding these nuances can significantly improve your communication and prevent misunderstandings. For example, in some cultures, a direct no can be considered impolite, and people might use softer phrases like, "that might be difficult," or "I'll see what I can do" to convey a refusal. Similarly, the level of directness in giving feedback or making requests can vary greatly. I recall an incident involving my friend David, who was visiting Japan for the first time. David, being from a very direct culture, asked a shop assistant, "Where is the restroom?" very directly. The assistant, while helpful, seemed a little taken aback. Later, David learned that a more culturally appropriate way to ask would have been, "Excuse me, could you possibly tell me where the restroom is?" The added politeness markers, even in a simple question, make a big difference. This wasn't about grammar. It was about the social rules of communication. Recognizing these subtle differences, even in English, will make your interactions much smoother and more respectful. Pay attention to how native speakers phrase requests, apologies, and disagreements. Notice the use of please, thank you, would you mind, could you possibly, etc. A vital skill for continuous improvement is self-correction techniques. Mistakes are not failures, they are opportunities for learning. The ability to identify your own errors, whether in listening or speaking, and then correct them is a sign of an advanced learner. When you speak, if you realize you've made a grammatical error or used the wrong word, don't just ignore it. Try to rephrase it correctly. If you misunderstand something while listening, try to ask a clarifying question. This active process of identifying and fixing errors reinforces correct usage and helps you learn from your experience. For instance, if you say, "I go to the store," and immediately realize "goed" is wrong, you can quickly self-correct. "Oh, sorry, I went to the store." This small act of self-correction is incredibly powerful for solidifying the correct form in your brain. It shows you are actively monitoring your own language production. To maintain your motivation and track your progress, it's essential to be setting realistic goals and tracking progress. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Break down your larger goals into smaller, achievable steps. Instead of, "I want to be fluent," try, "This month I will practice shadowing for 15 minutes every day." Or, "This week I will have one conversation in English with a language partner." Celebrate these small victories. Keep a journal of new words you've learned and used, or note down improvements in your ability to understand different accents. Seeing your progress, however small, is a huge motivator. A powerful way to immerse yourself and keep learning is by using authentic materials. Beyond podcasts, dive into English TV shows and movies, with subtitles initially, then without, news articles, blogs, and even English language social media. These materials offer real-world English, exposing you to diverse vocabulary, current expressions, and natural speech patterns. Choose materials that genuinely interest you, as this will make the learning process enjoyable and sustainable. If you love cooking, watch English cooking shows. If you're into history, find documentaries. The more you connect your learning to your passions, the more likely you are to stick with it. Our final practical tip is to create an English-only zone or time. This could be a specific hour each day when you only consume English content, or a designated space in your home where you only speak English, even if it's just to yourself. This intentional immersion, even for short periods, forces your brain to operate solely in English, accelerating your progress. It's like a mini English-speaking country in your own life. For our last practice, I want to give you some open-ended discussion prompts. These are designed to encourage more extended speaking practice, where you can integrate all the skills we've discussed, listening to the prompt, formulating an opinion, justifying it, and using natural intonation and vocabulary. After listening question, pause it, then you can speak your answers out loud to yourself, or if you have a language partner, discuss them together. Here are a few prompts. What is one positive change you would like to see in your community, and how do you think it could be achieved? If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why? What is a skill you've always wanted to learn, and what steps could you take to start learning it? After listening question, pause it. Take your time with those. Think about them, speak your answers out loud, and don't be afraid to pause, rephrase, or even self-correct. That's all part of the learning process. And that, my wonderful listeners, brings us to the end of this really in-depth look at improving your listening and speaking skills. We've gone from the basics of active listening through tackling tricky connected speech and new words to building confidence in speaking by focusing on intonation and using natural fillers. We then explored powerful integration techniques like shadowing and active recall. And finally, we got into advanced strategies such as understanding idioms, cultural nuances, and the critical importance of self-correction and consistent, enjoyable practice. Remember, the path to fluency is not a straight line. It's a winding road with many exciting discoveries along the way. Every time you actively listen, every time you bravely say something, every time you push past that initial hesitation, you are building muscle, strengthening connections, and moving closer to your goal. The key is consistency, curiosity, and a willingness to embrace mistakes as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. You have the power within you to transform your English communication. Keep practicing, keep listening with intention, and keep speaking with courage. The world is waiting to hear your voice. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Best English Podcast. It is truly an honor to be a part of your English learning journey. I'm Sophia, and I look forward to joining you again very, very soon on this continued adventure. Until then, keep shining.